Hey class, today we're going to take a look at how the neuron sends impulses, and it does so in a process called the action potential. And the action potential relies on membrane polarity. Here's some key vocab you're going to need. Polarity, phospholipid, bilayer, sodium channel, sodium potassium pump, ion, extracellular fluid, and intracellular fluid. So in order to understand how a neuron can send an impulse, first of all, we have to understand that the neuron has a membrane. And outside of that membrane, there's going to be fluid, known as extracellular fluid, or ECF, and inside is going to be intracellular fluid, or ICF. And there's going to be channels between the ECF and the ICF through the membrane that allow certain substances to pass. So right now, I'm drawing a red channel and a green channel for a red substance and a green substance. And then I'm going to draw an active transport pump called a sodium potassium pump. The red channel is going to be for sodium, the green channel is going to be for potassium, and it's going to allow these ions that are dissolved in the fluid, either extracellular or intracellular, to pass back and forth across the cell membrane. So remember, red is sodium channel, green is potassium channel, and the red and green cross is going to be what's called the sodium potassium pump. And these are going to be what allows ions to move back and forth in and out of the cell. Now remember, these channels are going to be closed when the cell's at rest and not transmitting an impulse. So what you guys are seeing right here is what's called the resting state of the neuron. The channels are closed, the bilayer is preventing any ions from crossing, and you'll notice that there's a whole lot more sodium ions on the ECF, and there are a lot more potassium ions on the ICF, and there are negative ions on both sides. Now those negative ions are important, but they don't take part in this, but I put them here just so you can see that they exist. And if you count them up, you'll see that actually there's slightly more positive ions on the outside and slightly more negative ions on the inside. And this gives us a resting membrane potential that we call negative 70 millivolts. And we can actually graph this resting membrane potential on a graph. We can graph this entire process on a graph, which you see over on the right-hand side of the screen. So when the cell's at rest, we're at negative 70 millivolts. Now, the first thing that happens when a cell goes to conduct an impulse is the sodium channel opens. That is going to be step one. And that allows sodium ions to start flowing into the cell. Now, why do they flow into the cell? They flow into the cell because there's a lot of sodium on the outside. So there's what we call a concentration gradient. And that forces sodium into the cell, and that causes the inside of the cell to become more positive, and you see that rise up. You see the graph rise up and the action potential, and you see a spike in voltage. Now, as the graph rises up, step two happens, and that is where the potassium channels are going to open. And as you could guess, since this inside of the cell has become so positive, that is going to force potassium to start to leave the cell, which we'll see in just a little bit. Potassium starts to leave the cell, which, as you can guess, is going to cause the voltage to start to drop back down again. As the positive ions flow out of the cell, the voltage will start to drop. Now the key is, because there was more sodium than there was potassium, as the potassium starts to leave, we never actually get to positive 70. We only get to about positive 30 millivolts. And then as the potassium diffuses out, we drop back down towards negative 70 again. And you might think, well, the cell's ready to send another impulse because we're back to resting potential. But notice, we're not back to resting potential because we have...
Can we send another impulse yet? The answer is no.
That's right. We're not ready yet because we don't have polarity anymore. We have the same number of sodium inside of the cell and outside of the cell, and we have the same amount of potassium in the ECF as we do in the ICF. So what do we have to do? We have to restore that polarity, or that imbalance of charges. And we do that through active transport in the sodium potassium pumps. And that's going to move potassium back into the cell, and that's going to move sodium back out of the cell. And on our little graph, that is going to be step 5. And when we're done, we'll see in step 5, the sodium potassium pump has put sodium back out of the cell and potassium back into the cell, and we have polarity restored. Now, it's only once polarity has been restored and there's more sodium outside and more potassium inside that the cell is ready to send another impulse.
I hope that was helpful.
And I hope that helped. Let's take a look at that key vocabulary again. And as always, if you like what you've seen, please hit like and subscribe to Mr. Bernard's YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.